So, we were just having the conversation about your father passing away at a young age and how that impacted you. So, would you want to share a bit about that process for you?
Well, I think probably one of the most significant events in my life was to lose my father when I was only 12 years old. It was in the middle of the Depression, 1933, on June the 14th. Dad was taken from us. He'd been sick for quite a while. And I remember Mother called us in and had us kids come up to his bed and say goodbye. It was in the middle of the night.
Wow.
And the next morning, my mother gathered us around the table and explained the situation. And she told us then, she says, we're going to depend on Jesus to take care of us. And she refused to take any kind of aid, welfare. She was confident the Lord would provide. And my part of it was that at 12 years old, I got my first job. My first job was delivering milk. Got up at 4:30 every morning and got on this milk truck and carried the bottles of milk from the truck to the houses. And that was my beginning. This is during this summer. It worked pretty well. And so the impact was, I think I grew up much faster, quicker than a lot of kids did, and certainly it instilled in me a responsibility.
Yeah. What were so with your parents, they both impacted you even before you lost your dad, their history with their own faith. Can you tell us more about that?
My parents were an interesting combination. Although we were all Mennonites, my mother came from one strain of Mennonites and my dad from another. My mother's strain was the General Conference of Mennonites, and it was sort of inclined more to professionalism, to business, that type. My dad, on the other hand, came from the Mennonite Brethren, and it was primarily agricultural. And these two strains came together in our family. And it was only in recent years that I was able to recognize the impact of those two strains had on the lives of my brother, my sister, and me.
That's amazing. And so you had shared that each of you actually got an education, right? And because your parents did. So what did your parents do, and what did you do?
One of the interesting things was that my parents were outliers in the sense that way back in the first part of this last century, they both went to college. My mother is a graduate of Biola, and my dad graduated from Moody Bible Institute. And so, which was an uncommon practice, especially among Mennonites. And I think it was that influence that encouraged my brother and my sister and myself not only to go through college, but all of us received our masters.
Wow.
And felt that it was something that we could pass along to our own kids, which we've seen duplicated.
Right. That's amazing. Was there anything like that your mom, specifically after your father passed away, like things that she taught you that you still remember or that you feel like have impacted you specifically?
Well, I know. The big thing that Mother left with us was her trust in God. The confidence she had that God would take care of us even though we had nothing. I've often said my dad died leaving us with more debts than dollars. And I remember one of the things that I was charged with doing was every month taking $20 to a couple of ladies who had loaned my dad and mother, I think it was $200. And after Dad died, I remember going across town with that $20 bill to pay on that debt until it was completed. And I think those things have certainly impacted how I look on life and the whole concept of responsibility.
I love that. That's really special. Okay. There's so many questions we could go into. You had shared that one of the things that you decided about your path in life was that you never wanted to embarrass your mom. And how did that impact your decision making as you grew older?
I think one of the things that I purposed or proposed in my own life when I started getting involved in friendships and getting out into the world, that I never wanted to do anything that would embarrass my mother. And I felt that was an important characteristic or concern, and it certainly followed me through my entire life. Even at this point, I still remember that pledge that I made.
It's amazing. I think we didn't talk about this, but I'm realizing as we're talking right now that I haven't asked the question, was there a moment when you chose to follow Jesus? Like when you became aware of that? Even though your mom gave you that really strong foundation, both your parents, do you have a moment when you kind of realized Jesus is real and this is what I want for my life? Like what was that like for you?
Well, that year that my dad died, 1933, was very significant. In fact, losing him, getting my first job, that sense of responsibility, and about 2 months after Dad died, I accepted Christ as my Savior. I was 12 years old, September the 1st, 1933. At a tent meeting, I said yes. I opened the door of my heart and let Jesus come in. And that has governed me or controlled me or directed me throughout my entire life.
Wow.
It was later on that after I had finished high school, it was our custom in the Mennonite church to go to Bible school for a year, which I did locally. And after that, I enrolled at the junior college in our community, hoping to get enough of an education to be able to support my mother adequately. And I felt that I probably should go into accounting, and I started a course along that route. And it was after that first year in college, there were two gentlemen in the community, not related to me. One was a teacher, the other was the director of the local YMCA, and they took an interest in me, and they sponsored me, sending me to Mount Hermon for 1 week at the youth camp. So I went, and it was a very significant event in my life, because it was there that I sensed the Lord calling me into ministry. And I came home confident that that's what the Lord wanted. This ran into conflict with my major that I was following, because I wanted to do something to earn a living, and all of a sudden God was calling me into serving Him. And how was I going to reconcile this? I had this responsibility with my mother, and I had this calling from the Lord. Well, my mother encouraged me to follow the Lord, to go into ministry. And consequently, I changed my major. I was blessed to spend my junior year of college at Wheaton, and that was a wonderful experience. And I happened to be in the same class as Billy Graham, and so he was sort of a friend for the rest of my life. But I finished that first year of college, and then another significant event took place, and that was the attack at Pearl Harbor.
Wow.
In 1941. And of course, the life of all of us young guys changed, because it was in 1942 we had to register for the draft, and then we were subject to being called. However, I was in a position where I was entitled to be able to continue my education with the purpose of becoming an Army chaplain. And I applied for that deferment. Unfortunately, the draft board under which I was registered didn't seem to have time or enough commitment to take care of my request, and it was delayed and delayed until it was too late for me to continue at Wheaton. I was home in California trying to determine what I should do next. I knew if I weren't in school, I would be drafted. So I had to figure out some way to get into school. Well, I hoped to go back to Wheaton, but finally I realized that was impossible. The classes had started back there, and I still didn't have my word that my deferment had come through. So finally one day I decided, told my mother, I'm going to just go to school someplace, and I think I might as well go up where my girlfriend is going to school at San Jose State. So I got into my car, my 1921 Model T, and drove up to San Jose. I got there Friday evening, and we spent the weekend together. Monday morning, I went to registrar's office to register for class, and I was told that registrations had closed on Friday. So now what do? Well, I convinced Fern to go with me up to Berkeley to see if I could get into Cal. So we drove up to Berkeley. I had my transcripts with me, went into the registrar's office, told us to come back after lunch, went back, and I had been accepted. That's how I got into Berkeley.
Wow.
So I continued my studies at Berkeley and graduated from Berkeley in 1944.
And then how long did it take from your application to starting? Was it pretty quick? Like when you dropped your transcripts and applied to Berkeley, did they let you know pretty immediately that you were
2 hours.
What?
Yes,
Yeah.
I dropped off the transcripts about 11:30 in the morning, and the lady told me, go have lunch, we'll have a word for you in the afternoon.
Wow.
I went back at 1:30 and I had been accepted.
It's very different from how it is now.
Blows your mind.
It blows your mind, it does.
All things are possible.
I love it.
Only believe.
So this is a perfect